Hey guys, welcome to the BP, the Bible Perspective. Now we're currently talking about, as the title says, Christians should have better sex than porn stars. And this was inspired by some questions some young Christians had asked, and even older Christians have asked this. Is watching pornography wrong if it spices up our marriage? In other words, can we watch pornography and learn techniques that they use? And again, the answer is no, because pornography is fake. Now, before we continue on, please hit like and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to be notified of upcoming teachings that we will be producing. Now, pornography. One of the most dangerous things about pornography, and again, it affects the mind, and we'll kind of get to that in a moment, but it is the easiest accessible thing that you can access on your iPhone or your phone. That has to be iPhone, phone, tablets, laptops, desktops, TV, right? There's not a place you can go in the world that you can access pornography. And so the idea is that people think that if I watch pornography, and I know sometimes for men, you think if I get my woman to watch pornography, she's going to act like the porn star. And maybe a woman may think, but if I watch pornography with my man, that, maybe I can please him like the porn stars. The deception here is that pornography is fake. It's an illusion. I'm not minimizing in any way the power of its lust. It is right there. And let me also say this. Be forewarned, we're going to use language that may make some uncomfortable, but this is just the facts. One of the dangerous thing about pornography, not only is it the most or the easiest accessible thing you could access on the computer or the internet, but it's also now private. So it used to be, if you wanted porn, you had to order the magazines. They would come wrapped in a brown paper bag. You used to be able to walk down the street, especially a downtown area. You see a newsstand, and you would see all of the pornography magazines lined up on the stands, right? I remember the little young boy, 12-year-old boy, being exposed to pornography by my neighbor's brother. I mean, he had the hardcore. That's the first time you actually saw it. So, pornography inflames, it excites the lust, without a doubt. But to answer the question that so many people are asking, that can we watch pornography to stimulate our marriage? Well, if you have to watch pornography to stimulate your marriage, you have a problem. The first thing is that pornography is fake. Remember, it's an illusion. They're acting. And while very few porn stars actually enjoy the act of sex while they're filming pornography, the vast majority will tell you it has absolutely no effect on them, that what they're doing has no pleasure, no effect. It is performance. So if you think, well, if I touch my wife this way, and I am presuming we're talking about your wife, we're talking about your husband, we're talking about your marriage. And I'm going to get to outside of the marriage in a moment. But if you say, by watching pornography, that my spouse is going to be pleased by the way that the porn stars handle each other, you're deceived. It's an act. That's why. In other words, touching them that way doesn't please them. It doesn't please the porn stars. By the way, one quick reference, and I do recommend it. It is an adult theme, but there's a documentary called After Porn. There's a few of them out there. I recommend that because they talk about this. The porn stars, they talk about their life on the set, the effect, what it does, what it doesn't do. So for the Christian, why would you reduce yourself? God has given us something better. Now, if you remember, we went to Genesis chapter 2. And when God created the heavens and the earth, and God created everything, right, all of the creation, lastly, he created man. He said about everything that he created, it is good. When he created man, he said, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a companion. And having searched all of the other creatures, Adam gave names to all of the creatures. The result was none of the creatures could be a suitable companion for man. So sorry, you animal lovers, dog is not man's best friend. If you think that having relationships or having a dog is a substitute for a human relationship, you're deluded. Okay? That's not what God created. So God created Eve and presented Eve to Adam. Adam said, this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. It should be called woman because she was taken from man. He also issued a universal marriage principle, or law, if you may, that therefore a man should leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, and they would be one flesh. He also said in chapter 2 that the man and the woman were naked and were not afraid or ashamed. And that's interesting because what has happened since that time is there is a shame in nakedness. There are married couples who feel ashamed before each other. Now, the reason why that's changed, now let me go, before I move on, I think the significance is what God created in that phrase, they were ashamed. Now, I mean, they were naked and not ashamed. They enjoyed the full range of what God had created in sex. And let's keep in mind, God created sex. God said, I'm going to make a male body. When he made Adam, right? He made fingers, he made eyes, he made nose, right? But he also made a penis. And he made a penis, a functioning penis. He made a penis to respond, right? That's why he said, oops, he didn't say oops, but he said, it's not good for man to be alone, right? Because man has to do something with that penis. God created man to do something with that penis. So now when he created Eve, and Eve was a perfect fit. Just think about this for a moment. Where God created or placed the penis. And then he created Eve, and then he placed the vagina. Think about how that works out. So that while man and woman is coupling, they're looking at each other. They're facing each other. You see, remember, God thought of all of this. Pornography didn't. That's one of the things. You sell yourself cheap in thinking you're going to learn something from pornography. And by the way, pornography only discovered. I'm going to get to that in a moment. The reason why you can think that pornography is so good at sex, or that the variety of sex, is because they discover it. The reason why marriage couples don't is because you don't explore and discover. Again, we get to that later. But the idea is that God created a man and his wife to fully enjoy the full range of sexual activity. And by the way, God did not place any restrictions on marriage, even after the fall, even in the law of Moses. Not one single scripture places a restriction on what you can and cannot do in the marriage bed. Now, let that marinate, because over the centuries, man has completely destroyed that. So Adam enjoyed that, by the way. Adam and Eve, they enjoyed the sexual freedom, the sexual, what God had intended for sex to be. And in the relationship, in the marriage, make no mistake about it, sex is an integral part of marriage. A healthy sex life is an integral part of marriage. And as a married couple, if you are not having a healthy sex life, there is something wrong with your marriage. Because you should be. And we'll get into all of the nuances. Okay? In other words, all things being equal, meaning healthy and all that. Not only healthy, but right mind, emotions. We got to flesh all that out. But if you're both healthy, you should be enjoying a healthy sex life. So the question becomes, why aren't you? And that comes to after the fall of Adam. When Adam ate of the fruit that God told him not to eat of, he plunged man into sin. Now the result of that, man began to live apart from God. He began to live by his sin nature. And he began to live according to his own sinful lusts. And that brings us to the word fornication. Now I like the word fornication. It's actually an old English word. Many of you know it from the King James Bible. And there are a few words from the old King James that I like. Propitiation is one. But fornication survives that. You can transliterate that word because I think it retains just the mention of it. It retains the meaning. Now, some of your newer translations may translate fornication as sexual immorality. I just think, again, fornication is the more stronger word. Now, fornication. I'm going to give you a biblical meaning of it. And then I'm going to give you another meaning of it. Fornication, this is the book, is the unlawful sexual activity outside of the God-ordained marriage. That's textbook. It is the unlawful sexual activity outside of the God-ordained marriage. Fornication can include, but not limited to, premarital, extramarital sex, meaning premarital sex before marriage. Extramarital sex, meaning adultery. How about bestiality? Homosexuality, but also can be considered necrophilia, or having sex with the dead. And masturbation. Now, masturbation I'm going to put off to the side, but I want to explain why it fits into fornication. Okay? Again, you have to hear me when I hear the whole thing here. All right. All right. So, but fornication, now, that's the biblical definition. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you my definition also. That fornication is the self-centered, selfish use of a place, person, or thing for one's own gratification. All of that fits into fornication. Let me say that again. Fornication is the selfish, self-centered use of a person, place, or thing for one's own gratification. In other words, when Adam fell into sin, then from that point, sin destroyed what God intended, of course, in creation. But in particularly in marriage, it destroyed what marriage should have been. There was no longer a loving relationship. Women became self-servant. A servant to man. And ever since that time, when we talk about male chauvinism, the idea of male chauvinism comes from an ungodly perspective. The way man has always treated women since the fall. So in other words, it was never again an object of love, even in marriage. That's why you also had two marriages, three wives, right? You have people that had 2 and 3 and 4 or 5 wives. But that was an invention of man. God did not create that. But fornication is the selfish, self-centered use of a person, place, or thing. And this is what you're going to find in every aspect of this sinful act of the sex outside of the God-centered sex. So if I, as a married man, commits adultery, it is my selfish, understand, my selfish, self-centered use of another woman or a man, right, for my own gratification, right? How about sex toys, right? people use sex toys. Well, you're using sex toys if it fits in the self-centered, selfish use of that thing, meaning the sex toy, for my own gratification, right? That's fornication. See, fornication is, again, unlawful. The term unlawful doesn't mean in our term lawful. Rape is unlawful. And I'm not talking about unlawful. But fornication is the self-centered, selfish act. Now think about that. Self-centered, selfish act. It is the let me rephrase this. Fornication is, when I say unlawful, I mean outside of God's law, outside of God's intended purpose. That's unlawful. Okay, so sex was designed for marriage. So any use of sex outside of marriage makes it unlawful. And that's what I meant. Okay. So adultery, okay, that's fornication. Marriage, sex outside of marriage or before marriage, okay, that's unlawful biblically. Okay, so in our culture, unlawful sex could be rape, right? Pedophilia, and it should be. Bestiality is against the law. Okay, and even sex with a dead body, that's against the law, and it should be. Okay, so I'm not talking about those. As I said, though, fornication would include that. But from a biblical standpoint, unlawful sex simply means sex outside of what God intended. So now, why does fornication then persist? Because man is fallen. Man is sinful. And so man does he seeks to gratify himself. By the way, this is also women as well. By the way, pornography among women is up. So sex among women, fornication among men and women in a selfish pursuit. And one of the most interesting things is I always hear people say adultery. I always hear people talking about adultery, what adultery is. And so you say, well, men are dogs. Why? Because they always cheat. And my question is, well, who are they cheating with? So that makes women as much dogs as well. And in our world that we live in today, that we're now become familiar with, a man can cheat with a woman, he can cheat with a man. Same thing with a woman. She cheats with a man, but she can also cheat with a woman. My point is, all that exists outside of the God-ordained marriage. So now, if I'm fornicating, then I am having sex. I am using my body. I'm using a person's body. I'm using things for my own self-centered gratification. And that becomes why, it doesn't satisfy. And I'll get more on that in the next video, so I'll see you then.